everybody. Welcome to the Delta CX Live podcast. I am your friend, Debbie Levitt from DeltaCX.com. Welcome all of you low ego action heroes. And today we are going to jump right in with a panel discussion on startups to talk about startup successes, failures, and warnings. And all of us on the panel today have had startups or have them now. So we are here to try to help you out. If you are joining live on LinkedIn or on YouTube, please join the chat and ask your questions live. I'll be monitoring the room. And let's get everybody in and let's introduce some people. So let's start with Nehal. Is that how you pronounce? I hope I got that right. Please introduce yourself, spell your name.
Cool. Hi, everyone. My name is Nehal Shah. That is spelled Nehal Shah. I'm currently the head of Sustain at Immersion Group. I essentially help organizations build their design capabilities. Startup-wise, I'm a 3-time startup failure, 1-time startup fairly successful. And that's me.
All right, great. Thank you for joining. And now, Dr. Francis, please spell your name for everybody since tomorrow this goes out as an audio-only podcast. And please tell us about your background.
Thank you very much, Debbie. My name is Francis Nwakire. Nwakire is Nwakire. It's a name from West Africa, south of Nigeria precisely. And my background is I'm a healthcare product specialist, and I've been in the startup world for a bit of time now. And I've had success, one failure, and I've got one emerging, hopefully success in the works right now. And I've worked with a ton of startups. I do try to help companies at different phases of their life evolution, walk past the barriers that they may face in the course of what I do every day. Thank you, Debbie.
Thank you so much. And Tom, someone I've known for a few years now and a secret partner on a secret startup. So Tom, tell us about your world.
Hi, everybody. My name is Tom Kozacinski, but short Tom. It's spelled Tomkozacinski. I'm terrible with spelling, especially in English. I've known Debbie for quite some time. I will not talk about super secret startup that we are now cooking, but I did a couple of startups. A lot of them failed, and more relevant, I think, is I've been mentoring with Techstars for the past 5 years. I helped a lot of startups, and I work as a product designer, and I help funded startups basically get off the ground and help their developers deliver quickly. So hopefully people will have some use of my experience today.
Excellent. Well, what a wonderful panel. And really quickly, I know some of you who watch the channel and might even possibly subscribe to the channel. Sorry, it covers our faces. Subscribe, everybody. Won't you please usability test the subscribe button? Just make sure it works. Those of you who subscribe or know me might not know that I had a startup for many years back in California. I did the Silicon Valley startup thing with everybody else. We even had a little bit of angel money, and then we had a patent troll. And between the patent problem and a couple of other wacky things, we had to shut down a few years ago. Mine was about personal safety, mostly for everyone who wasn't a straight man. So even though straight men are welcome to personal safety, but I found that they didn't seem to understand that they were unsafe as well as everybody else. So, so much for that. So let's talk about, we're talking about successes, failures, and warnings. Who has had some success? Anyone?
I'm more than happy to let somebody else speak first because I can just hog the mic. So anybody else start first, please.
Okay, Nehal, tell us about your success.
I think a big success, which is in my current organization at the moment, is moving past the startup phase. And one of the things that helped us do that is around the the delegation of responsibility as well as skills, right? So what I often find in other startups that I've helped mentor is often startup owners are essentially technical specialists, right? They come from, they have a very strong hobby around this stuff. They equate being good at the technical stuff to running a business. A great analogy that I like to use for this is that, being a baker and owning a bakery are very, very different things. In my startup, when we started off with my business partners, the baker and the business owner or the bakery owner were very clearly two different people. And I think that was very, very clever to do. And I think that has saved us a lot of problems and challenges.
Okay, thank you. Makes sense. Tom, you want to say a few words about successful startups?
Yes, I will just talk about the most recent one. This year, I was invited to join as a co-founder to a parenting startup that applied to Techstars program during COVID. It was the first remote Techstars thing, and I've been on the other side for so long mentoring. It was my first time actually being a member of a startup going through the same program, and I learned a lot. And we actually ended up being top 20 in the entire world, over 1,000 startups applied. So it was a great experience. Only top 5 got funded. We weren't funded, but it was a great learning experience. And now we are cooking the idea, see what will happen. And maybe if we scrape some funding, we're going to move forward.
Okay, so you're still a work in progress there.
The latest one is currently... basically, we need to decide how much money we want to spend on development for an early MVP because it's such a big market, and we are not even sure that people will onboard quickly as we need them, because potential expenses of the technology could become really big really quickly. So we need to do a smart play, because a lot of server costs and a lot of stuff can eat up a lot of money in the beginning. So we are now trying to build out a funding strategy.
Any reason you're not doing a realistic UX prototype as an MVP and you're going to go for coding something real?
So there is a UX prototype already that we went with on the competition itself. So it performed really well, and everybody said, yes, this is what we need, but it's stuck there. So now we kind of have the market validated. User bases, we got some really great feedback. We think we know what needs to be done, but it's a big project, and because it deals with children, development of young children, we need to onboard some really good specialists, and it's a big project, so it takes a little bit more time to align everything.
Okay, well, good luck with it. Keep us posted. Dr.
Thank you,
Francis, have you had any successes you can tell us about?
Yes, I've actually had a very, very good success a few years ago, and I spent a bunch of years in that startup actually. So, in the interest of confidentiality for my former partners, I wouldn't go into deep details, but I'll talk through some of the ways we were successful and some of the big lessons that I took away from that. So, I joined a group of guys that were already at it. I was invited to co-found this organization with them. Not co-found, but join the founding team after they've been at it for, I think, a couple of years, but not getting a lot of traction. Okay, and I was invited to figure it out essentially. How do we think we can actually take this from ground zero, which essentially that's where it was after 2 years of heavy investment, and I mean really, really heavy investment. Investors were getting really worried, and people were wondering if this business case was ever did make any sense. So I joined the organization, and I wouldn't say that I brought some magic, because I really did not. But what I really did bring to that organization, which became the essence of the success of that organization several years down the road, was I was obsessed about a problem. So I joined the organization, and rather than focusing on that thing we were trying to sell to people, that solution, that big product we wanted to put out there, or we're already putting out there, I went back to the problem space. Okay, so I spent a bunch of time in the problem space. I spent a lot of time validating that idea, researching that idea, looking at the problem that we were actually trying to solve, going out and talking to the people who were most impacted by the problem. And some of the steps that I took was not just speak to these people and research who these people were, but I went on to segment the different personas that we're trying to solve a problem for. So I call this deep learning your personas, deep learning your customers. So I deep learned my customers, and I was able to separate them into a few different segments, and then research, and then we went ahead and picked one segment. So by picking one segment, essentially became cheaper for us to keep the startup up and going, because we were trying to account for a whole bunch of people, and that really meant we were spread quite thin, and then we kept going back to ask for more funding. So now we're able to focus our funding on one specific segment, and that I think was the magic. Because now we're focusing our energies, we went to that specific segment, and we kept going back there until we turned all their no's to yeses. Because at first there were gaps, you look, there are gaps, and they don't really want to move. The propensity to purchase is super low because those gaps are significant to them, and then you cannot meet all those gaps across multiple segments. But by going to that segment and nailing it, I think that's when the startup really took off, and then we grew from there. So that became the beachhead, and then we were then able to iterate further and then begin to approach and erode other customer segments that we had put out on the parking lot. And I'd say that it became a huge success because we grew multiples, 1,000%. The footfall went up overnight. We became pretty good, and at the time, I think we were for the service we were offering, we were the best at that service. And the startup continued and continued to be a big part of my life for just under 5 years before I exited the business, and it still continues to run. And I'm super proud about what my partners have done because they've grown. They've even right now diversified the businesses. They have a lot more offerings out there, and it's been amazing.
Excellent. I'm very happy to hear that there have been some successes here. I'm making some notes while I'm talking to you guys, and I have some questions I want to ask, and we'll take turns. We hear so much about making sure you validate your idea, making sure you're building something that people really need. And I've spent so much time in startup worlds, both mostly in San Francisco and then a little bit in Barcelona, and I just feel like I heard terrible idea after terrible idea. I feel like I heard so many ideas of things that people were absolutely never going to want. But yet, when you speak to these people, they're absolutely sure that there's a market for this, there's a need for this. And I feel like that's sometimes a gap for startups, is the passion and the belief of the founders might not match the reality of the audience or the market. So I want to ask each of you, if you want to answer, do you have anything in particular you like to do, or any research you do, or testing, or things that you do to make sure that this idea is possible and not just a dream? And just a quick example, I met a guy at a startup event, and he was like, "Oh, I have an app that's going to help surfers go surfing together." And I was like,
Oh,
"Why don't they just WhatsApp each other?" And he was like, "No, this app is going to like help them coordinate like who's driving." And I was like, and they
okay.
could WhatsApp each other. So, but he was absolutely sure that he had done good validation of this idea. So let me go around everybody. I'll start again with Nehal. Do you have any suggestions for people? Maybe this is more suggestions or warnings. Validating your idea.
Yeah. Just before I go into suggestions, I think there's the belief and the blind faith and the passion around, no, I have the best idea, I'm going to make it work, naysayers can go, just go, can go, right? And on the other side, I've also seen, the other extreme where people spend so much time defining what they're trying to sell to the nth degree, right? And they spend so much time in just identifying, outlining, creating business plan after business plan, creating CVPs and decks and all of that, trying to explain what they're selling. And I think the suggestion to bridge both of these extremes for me that I found success in is try and get the dirtiest, quickest, sticky tape version of what you're trying to test out. because the only way you're going to know if this is going to work is if you have an early adopter market that is buying your product. That is the best feedback that you can get from your users. So try and get the dirtiest, quickest thing out that people are willing to pay for. And take
Okay, I like it. I like it. Tom, we'll have you go last. Dr. Francis, any advice or suggestions for the listeners on validating your idea?
Absolutely. And that's the most important part of this entire conversation, I'd say, because the idea is that's the catalyst for success or no, right? And the way I look at it, when I hear an idea, if that idea is not a problem, I'm worried. I want to hear an idea that's a problem. I'm not concerned about the solution. Solutions change over time. It changes for so many reasons. Technology might evolve. There might be a convergence of other ideas of other technologies that switch up the solution. But I want to know what the problem is, and I want to go on that journey of problem sizing. Okay, I want to understand how many people are actually impacted by this problem, and then of all the problems of all the people impacted by this problem, what are they doing for that problem today? How are they paying for that? What's the opportunity cost of having this problem today? And then when we go through that, then it begins to paint a better picture of what exactly what kind of markets we're gonna build out of this. And then I like to pick again one segment of the people that are very impacted by that problem, and I want to go out and get feedback from them. I want to get real feedback from them. I don't mean feedback in terms of what would you like to do, but what would you actually do? And bouncing off Nehal's point, that's when you want to take a simple prototype. It could be a PowerPoint presentation, it could be a pitch, a voice pitch. You want to go out there and speak to your potential users. You want to understand what they actually are going to do, and then by doing that, you then begin to get a good understanding of what exactly, how big that problem is, how much of a pain it is, and then you actually then begin to have an understanding of what solution might actually work. But if you start from the solution and then you're trying to force fit the solution into people's problems, that's a big error. Because honestly, I strongly believe that nobody cares about your product. People really care about their problems, and that's where you really need to start. And for me, that's how I look at it.
That's great. Well, very well said. Tom, what can you add to that?
Okay, so I'll try to take this a little bit more high-level approach about your original question. Like, do some people do testing, and should they test before they build something? And I found it in a couple of times where I would be the naysayer saying nobody needs that, and they're like, you can use WhatsApp. Why would I use dedicated app for messaging my surfers or whatever? But potentially I was now say to that guy, how about instead of messaging surfers, how I think somebody doesn't agree with me. So, but
Clearly.
how about building an app where I can meet other surfers? So I'm sure it's like a big community, but not everybody gets the chance to meet everybody. So it could be something else, not necessarily a messaging app. But instead of taking people down a peg, I would tell them, go out and just build an idea for a quick MVP and test it out quickly, test it out early before you actually start wasting money on building a big product. Like Francis said, just do some quick testing right now. And I don't want to be repeating the most famous Henry Ford quote, like, if you ask people what they want, they would say faster horses. So sometimes people actually don't know what they want. You need to build something. This is why we need visionaries that are building new products, new ideas. Yes, I agree. Sometimes they are building something we absolutely do not need, but we sometimes need those people to build something they know we will need. So of course, if people ask somebody, hey, how about, would you like to use an app where you get to travel 50% cheaper? No, everybody will say yes, and then you end up with something that basically gives you $5 discount on a flight. But people will say early yes to an idea when you explain it enthusiastically, but until you show them a prototype and explain how it actually solve their problem, I think it's just worth building something.
Excellent. I hope I was muted there after my dog freaked out. She's here. I'm doing my best to keep her calm. So let's read before I read a couple of things that are piling into the chat. We're getting our first questions. I'm just going to take a quick break to plug my company. Delta CX, available for CX and UX consulting, projects, and training. Quiet. Contact us for a free consultation. Olivia, be quiet. So also I want to remind everybody, the best way to show your support for the Delta CX universe is to usability test the subscribe button over on YouTube and empathize with the like button, give it a nice cuddle, and join our Slack community, deltacx.link/join Slack. That's all I'll say about that. Let's get to some of the comments and questions in the chat room. So Abi said, validation is like conducting interviews to know what a user thinks, or is it something of a different process? So we talked about that. Now Elijah had two questions back to back, so I'm going to read you both of his questions and I'm going to throw them at you guys. So thing one, Elijah said, as a new UX designer, should I focus on getting a job where I can strengthen my skills, or focus on producing my own project that may turn into a startup? So that was one question that he asked. Let's do a quick round of answers there. So someone who's new to UX, should they try to get their first UX job or try to do their own project that they could turn into a startup? Tom?
Okay, I'll go first. So if that person is a UX designer and they are building their own project, it doesn't mean necessarily they will turn into a startup just from their UX, whatever they're building. So they will either need to learn more skills and get on board other people, and then it will turn into a startup. Or if they want to strengthen the skill, maybe start with a job first to see what else includes whatever they are doing, what else is connected with that, and then move to the project.
Nehal, you want to add?
Go ahead, Nehal.
Thanks, Francis. Sorry. No, I absolutely agree with Tom, right? This is exactly the baker versus the bakery owner. A business is so much more than what any one person can offer. And that's why it's bigger. The UX person, Elijah, is going to end up with a prototype, maybe a coded something. What's going to happen with the entire value chain and the ecosystem that needs to surround it to make it successful, right? You need people with their skills to make it happen. My recommendation would be try and validate the idea, MVP it, test it very, very quickly, and then find people who believe in your vision if you really want to take it into a startup world.
All right, thank you. Dr. Francis.
And yeah, so taking it back to the first line, which is as a new UX person. So as a new UX person, Elijah probably needs both. And by both, I mean separating from saying this thing I'm going to work on is going to become a startup. I think he needs to work on personal projects, to hone those skills, to get his hands dirty, to keep practice going. And I think he also needs to try and get in with people that are already working on something. And I think both of them complement each other, because typically when you're about to get hired or when you're going through the interview phases, people want to get an idea of some types of projects you've worked on in the past. Sometimes they want to see a portfolio or something they can reference. So by doing both, it sort of helps himself get into that dream job. And then let's say down the road the job never comes and he's got this fantastic idea that's going to grow into something, but then he would have been spending time on it and going out and networking, and he could potentially find people that would believe in that vision and help him bring it to life. So I'd say, why not both?
And I would quickly say kind of both. Like I would say definitely if you want to move up in the UX world, you've got to get that first job and keep moving up. But nothing stops you from trying to work on an idea and validating it and building a startup on the side. So I think in this economy, I'm trying to advise people to be a little bit more conservative and maybe get jobs where you can and ease into that startup thing. And then Elijah had a follow-up question, which was, and this may be more for me and Tom, so if you guys want to comment, you can also, but I'll let Tom go first. Is it worth it to join a startup as one of its first designers if you're a new designer? Or should you wait until you're a more experienced designer before getting into early stage startups?
Okay, great question, and it can be either or. And I'm drawing from my experience here. I joined a startup where I was when I was very junior, and all of the other founders were very experienced, and I was just holding them back, and they needed somebody more experienced. And a couple of months in, they replaced me with somebody way experienced who got the project moving way faster. And now in hindsight, I'd see that was a great decision. Back then, it felt really wrong. I felt like, oh, I could have done better or whatever. But I was just not at a place where they were. But I also joined a startup where everybody was fairly new. So everybody was learning as they were going along, building new stuff. So if you're joining a startup as a junior person with the junior developers and people want to learn marketing, everybody else, you can build something great and learn along the way. But if you're really junior, joining some very senior team, there's a big chance that you will not contribute as much as you would like.
I would echo that, and I would also say that, again, very often a UX designer at a startup, there's no team. You are the team. So a lot of people who are just learning UX, especially just out of a boot camp or other program, they're usually hoping to get a job where there is mentoring and coaching and someone who's more senior who can help them learn more about UX. And very often that is not the case in a startup. So I would say just think about the type of experience you want to have in your early UX jobs, because it's very rare that a startup has a mature UX team where you're going to get mentoring and coaching. And everyone's nodding. So I'm going to move on. We have like a chat room full of questions. No lack of questions today. So I apologize if I pronounce people's names not very well. Shawnee Gerber. Shawnee says, how can we encourage startups to humbly accept the negative validation feedback and turn this into a positive to improve their product rather than the common mistake of ignoring the data and continue? Yes, I love this question. Oh my God. Yes, because we all need an app for surfers. Nehal, let me start with you, Nehal, on that one. Have you found that there's any magic or trick that got you to wake people up to using the negative feedback to pivot?
Yeah, when the money stops coming in, that's a pretty big catalyst to change. It's as
That'll
easy
wake you
as
up.
that. Yeah, that'll absolutely wake you up, and in a very, very shocking way. I also find that if people are not in the mindset of feedback and therefore iteration, I think you shouldn't be in the startup business.
Yes, great. Yes, absolutely.
Harsh, but yeah.
No, we're here for that. That's what this channel is about. This channel is not, hey, if you want to have a startup and make millions in your first year, that is not this channel. Francis, something to add to that?
Yes, and I have an interesting perspective to this, and that's so thinking about it. I've found in my experience a few startups that go out there with ideas that are great to the founders. The founders really believe this idea, and they bring it out there, and then the idea sort of takes off. They're able to raise funding, they're able to bring people in, they're able to get a few contracts in early days. But the idea was not the problem was not properly sized. And then you find that super early in their life, they are already maxing out their potential. They're already maxing out the prospects they could the customers they could possibly get. And then this is not enough, essentially, to justify the whole big gig you've got going on, right? However, I'm thinking specifically of industries where there's no real precedence for the problem that you're solving, no real precedence for the solution that you've built. And then you find that people continue to invest in this startup and they continue to be out there present, they continue to be out there iterating on this thing, pivoting and eventually perhaps pivot their way to success. However, some of them never end up pivoting their way to success. But just because there is unclear understanding of the problem they're trying to solve because of the lack of precedence, you find that these founders persevere. They keep going at it. They believe that this problem really, really works because they keep getting funding. And so, contrary to Nehal's point, they actually keep getting the money in, and they get this money in from the back. So there are two ways. You can either get the money in through the front door from your customers, or getting the money in through the back from your venture backers or your investors. And they keep getting money in from the back, and these startups continue to survive much longer than you would imagine for the type of problem that they are trying to solve. So it's a bit difficult to broach that problem with those types of startups, because so many of them have lived on for so many years and continue to live on, regardless of the fact that they don't have a big enough problem they're trying to solve. They haven't really truly found proper product market fit for anything. And I'd say, I don't know, it's a tough one. It's a tough one for those ones. But for the ones that have money dry up after some time, that depend predominantly on the front door to get their revenue in, their funding in, the reality sort of hits them pretty much in the face pretty fast. But for those other ones, it's a tough problem.
Yeah, I agree. I've seen it time after time. Surfing app, among others. I did ask the surfing app guy, like, it sounds like you should do some user research to make sure people really need this. And he's like, oh, we did. And I'm thinking,
Okay.
how do they do this now? Okay, I'm just gonna smile and nod. Okay, good luck, nice young man. Abi says, if problem changes while validating the idea, is the root to that particular idea... Okay, let me turn this around a little bit. If the problem changes while validating the idea, should the root to that particular idea be dropped? Should a new problem be framed to research again? It sounds like you'd need to research again if while trying to validate your idea you end up with a new problem. I think that's what Abi's asking.
Or you get two problems to solve.
Why would...
Yeah.
Yeah, but like, why?
Because problems don't really change, right?
Yeah.
Well, maybe the problem space is the same, but the definition of the problem has been isolated further, or has been specified differently, or the framing has changed. But I would not stick to the same solution. No.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I agree. I think just to the point where it was asked, like, how do we get startups to humbly accept a negative review? And I've seen it on both ends. Like Francis said, some people who listen and they go forward, and sometimes there's a lot of ego that they won't listen and they stick to what they think should be. I once had an opportunity to work with a startup that was building an app for developers to get pixel perfect design translated into code, so they could just basically compare to what is the design file and how it looks like when it's coded. And they were marketing that to developers who rarely care about pixel perfection. And when I spoke to them, they said they know the problem exists. And I told them, like, but yes, you need to market to designers, not to developers. Designers are those who care about pixel perfection. They said, like, yes, you're right. They changed it out on the spot, and they did, and they retargeted, went on to do really well. And I think recently they were acquired by Marvel, if I'm correct. So it went really well. They took on board everything. It was not only me, but a lot of people gave them a lot of really great advice, and they took everything on board, pivoted a little bit, and now they got acquired, and they're really kicking ass.
All right. Next question, also from Shawnee. And Shawnee says, we often see startups that also throw a lot of money into marketing and sales gimmicks before doing the research they need for the best methods and tech to use. And Shawnee wants to know if we have any recommendations on our favorite tech or software to use.
Does she mean for testing?
I'm not sure. I tried to get that cleared up, and recommendations, our favorite tech and software. Shawnee, you're here in YouTube. YouTube's usually a 20-second delay. Can can you give us a little bit more information on what type of tech or software you're hoping we're going to make recommendations about? Because we're not totally sure. Shawnee says for testing. So do we have tech or software we recommend for testing and research methods? Anybody want to jump on that?
Testing.
I think
What, Tom?
I'll just leave that to you. I think you're the person to answer that question.
Okay, Nehal, did you want to talk about something there?
Yeah, maybe not so much a tech or software, but rather a technique that we're experimenting with. So what we have done is on our website, on the internal facing, authenticated site of our website, we've created a little testing portal of our own, where anything that the organization needs to test goes on there. It's a little kit. It's self-moderated to start with. It takes you through everything. We have plugins from different, not so much eye tracking, but really what you're looking at, where you're stopping, etc. And that has that goes into a survey. We ask you a couple of quick questions. We get you to actually do stuff where someone else is watching, etc. So it's an unmoderated, usability test really. And from there, that helps sort out some of our quantitative data. From there, we pick a couple of random, a random sample, and then we do qualitative testing. So we do proper usability tests then on a couple of those people. So that has worked quite well for us in terms of quick feedback, but also rich insights when we go into qualitative research.
Okay, we've got a question from Seth, and this now kind of, I think we're getting into a little bit more of the failures mode, so I'm interested to hear all of you answer this question. Seth says, I've met quite a few founders who've been plugging away at a startup for 5 years or more and not really getting traction. What are some of the warning signs that shouldn't be ignored that would tell a founder to pack it up and quit? Dr. Francis.
Great question. And I'd say that it goes again back to the problem space, and I love to harp on that just because I know that that's the fundamental aspect of whatever you're doing, right? If you truly understand the problem that you're trying to solve and you've properly validated that problem and you've decided to build a business on top of that problem, part of the output from that is identifying the metrics that you truly care about. You must be able to know the top 2, top 3, whatever number of metrics that you care the most about, right? And those will be your guiding lights. You must at all points understand how you are doing against those metrics. And if you find that you're not doing as expected, then that calls for you to go back down the stairs and go and look into your problem again. You have to understand that moving from the problem to the solution space is not a one-way journey. Okay, it's several iterations. You're constantly moving from problem to solution, back to problem to solution, and back to problem. And every time you find that you are deviating from those metrics you want to actually meet, it calls for you to go back, reassess your research, redefine that problem, reinvestigate your problem space, your customer segments, etc., and really understand why you are missing the mark. And if you continuously find that you continue to miss the mark and all of your efforts to change direction isn't quite working, I think that it comes down to the discipline of the founders. It comes down to the point where, I mean, there's a broad school of thought out there to saying that startups don't fail. Startups can essentially kick off if they have a valid problem and pivot their way to success. I don't have anything against that school of thought. But if you find that you are blowing through people's cash, because that's essentially you're utilizing your resources, other people's resources, and people are investing their lives into getting this thing off the ground, and you find that with time this is not working, it comes down to the startup founder or the startup founders to decide when they want to stop. they have to make that decision to stop and rethink the entire thing. They probably need to take a break. Okay, but it comes down to their discipline. It comes down to how long they want to keep going at it. But essentially, the guiding lights are those metrics that you set forth when you define your problem. Those metrics that you are benchmarking yourself against, and you need to really, really do that. Without doing that, then that confusion of when do I start, when do I stop, how am I really doing other than blowing cash? Because it could be going through millions of dollars in your startup, but you see that you're continuously moving the needle against your metrics, then you keep going, right? And you may look at it like a total failure to the outsider, but you see that you are actually moving the needle on those metrics that matter the most to you. But if you're not, regardless of how much you're spending or not spending, you need to ask yourself questions.
That's great. Yeah, success criteria. I find a lot of people go wrong. The metrics, like you said, and then sometimes they're measuring things, but no one defined what does success look like and what does failure look like so that we have something tangible so that we know when we're in that warning zone. Nehal, something to add to that?
Can you just repeat Seth's question for me again?
Absolutely. Seth was saying that he's met a lot of founders who've been at a startup for 5 years or more. They're not getting traction. What would be the warning signs that shouldn't be ignored that would tell a founder to pack it up and quit?
Yeah, I think a different perspective to consider, apart from success metrics, is also like Francis would say, is the founder's behaviors, right? So I've been part of a now failed startup where one of the big signs internally that we should have seen coming was this obsession with perfectionism. A lot of founders, I've been in the same situation where we were like, no, but we need to get this right. We need to get this right. We know what's going to win in the market. This is, who we are up against. And that took years. And we were stuck in this mode of just getting it right as opposed to getting it to market. And in that, even though there might have been an opportunity that might have made our startup successful, our sort of risk aversion, our analysis paralysis, our confirmation bias sort of ruined it. So that's something to consider as well. So it's not just, maybe you don't have a bad idea. Maybe it's the culture and the behavior of the people responsible to make it happen.
Tom, anything to add to that?
Line from Nehal there. I picked a really good line from Nehal. Getting it right versus getting it to market.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I agree.
And it's
I
the balance
would-
between that, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. Nothing else to add. Just one little thing that some people who are starting their startup, and I don't know who's plugging away for 5 years, not having traction but having money to spend. I think it will be an interesting situation. Some people say that they have a startup, they are having like a side gig that's treated like a startup, so they are actually working and then building something. But if they don't even start with metrics, like Francis said, you need to start with metrics and know what your goals are. And sometimes people are just using their side hustle, calling it a startup, and just doing that instead of going out for drinks or having other hobbies. So just a hobby. So sometimes they just waste too much time in it, so they don't want to quit. So I think this is also one of the problems that needs to be solved.
Yeah, and I also saw a little bit in Silicon Valley. There were people who got a little bit of angel money or seed money, and they were under pressure to show that they were spending it. I mean, I can tell you in Silicon Valley, we were under pressure to show we were spending this money sometimes fast. And so a company that is still chipping away at something and a little bit lost might be a little bit over controlled or over manipulated by investors or potential investors. I've sometimes seen companies keep kind of changing direction every time they chase a different investor. Like, well, this investor seems to be into eco, so we got to do this now. Oh, and this investor's from pharma, we got to do this now. And they keep shifting a little bit. So I would say if you keep shifting to try to make one person or one VC or one firm happy or attract attracted to you, you're really chasing the wrong thing, because as everybody else here has said, we're chasing the problem. We're chasing the real problems of real people and how we can improve things for them. If you are chasing the VCs and the money and the whatever, you're probably going to end up in a bad cycle.
Yeah, if I just might add to this, sometimes it feels like startups are like, it's like they're dating the VCs. So like when you're in your teens and you're dating a girl that's goth chick, so you get your long dark hair and a leather coat because she listens to that music, and then you're dating a vegan girl and you stop eating meat because she's... So it feels a little bit like that. You're trying to be whatever VCs is and wants you to be. So it's kind of, you need to stop that and do you.
And guess what, Tom? Guess what, Tom? It seems to be like an angle. It seems to be actually a play that keeps startups going for several years. A lot of them, they keep that funding coming in. They keep changing direction with respect to which VC they are looking at, and they keep going for years. And then you find that the founders are super successful by what they define as success. You know, they're able to build some level of wealth for themselves. They have all these employees and fancy offices, and that becomes their goal. Their goal is to have a shop rather than solve a real world problem.
We've got a follow-up question from Tim, and Tim asks, do you think the customer is looking for perfectionism, or is perfectionism fueled by the owners wanting to have good statistics to show stakeholders or other people? Tom, you're nodding. Go for it.
I never met a customer that was seeking perfection. If customers were seeking perfection, we wouldn't have Android phones. I'm joking. I'm joking.
I am a very happy Android user. We had 3 iPhones die in this house last year. Don't get me started.
Yeah, I'm of course joking. I'm not in a either or camp. I'm just like, when we take a look at anything, it started as a not so great thing, and it just got better and better. So nobody pushed out a perfection. Not even not an iPhone or Android. I'm just taking a stab at for a comedic purposes. But
yes, we should mention Tom is a stand-up comedian. If you're in London and the COVID is over, nice. Make sure you go see Tom do his stand-up comedy.
Thank you for that plug. We are hoping that clubs get back into work anytime soon.
Sorry, go ahead. Perfectionism.
No, I'm done. I just wanted to do a little bit of a joke, but yeah, somebody else, please.
Yeah, I think we probably all agree. I don't want to speak for you guys, but hands up if you want to say something and that we haven't covered about perfectionism. Francis.
Yes, I do not think customers want perfection, because who's defining perfection? First of all, the customers, what they do know is their problem, and perfection has to do with your solution and really is defined by you, right? So what the customers really want is how your solution really matches up with their problem. To what degree does it solve their problem, and are you solving the problem to the degree that they then develop the propensity or the willingness to pay for that problem? Once you are able to let's say, get to that escape velocity, it doesn't matter how great your product is, because you have exceeded the opportunity cost of not having your solution to the customer, and they are willing to pay for you. They can complain, they can demand. Customers can be very demanding. They can want more. They can say, oh yeah, now that we've solved this one, what about this other thing? But they still will continue to pay, because the opportunity cost of not having your solution is so huge that they're not going to move on. And then perfection, like I said, is defined by the person that owns the solution. So you can either decide to continue doing smaller iterations and shipping smaller improvements to that product market fit that you've already found, or you can decide to do 0 improvements and wait a full year and then ship the one huge mighty product to kill all products. And in the meantime, you've got a lot of new entrants that have moved you away from the space.
So we only have a few more minutes, believe it or not. So I'm going to ask one last question, and that is, I want to ask each of you about something that hurt or killed one or more startups that you've been involved in, and what you could have done differently, just as a bit of a warning for those who are listening. And then we'll have to say our goodbyes. So who wants to talk first about what hurt or killed startups as a warning to others?
I can go.
Please do.
All right. So one of the singular issues I can say killed one of my startups was making the first wrong hire, right? We were in a mindset of, okay, we have a great idea. We had hyped ourselves up. We were all on the same page. There was like two of us. And then this other person came in, and he was our friend. And he was like, yeah, I'm in it too. And, at the end of the day, friends and family make great relationships. They don't make great business partners. Okay, so you'd be very lucky if you found someone who's a friend and a great business partner, because you're going to go head to head. You're going to have those arguments. You don't ever want to be scared or afraid of hurting someone's feelings, or that your relationship is going to be ruined now because you had a disagreement about where the business needs to go, and you're going to fall out. Like it's unnecessary. So especially with your early hires, think about hiring for the business needs that you have, for the skills that you need, and for someone who you believe is going to take that vision, as a founder that you have seriously, and shape it to be more. Don't do it for the sake of. To be very, very careful about your first hires.
Beautiful, beautiful warning, and excellent. Everyone write that down. Let me go to Dr. Francis. Warnings.
I'd say monetization. I'd say that when you found that you're solving a really great problem, your problem size is massive, you see how it impacts a lot of people, I'd suggest you also figure out how you monetize that problem if you intend to make money. I mean, there are startups that don't intend to make money, so that's okay. But if you do intend to make money, figure out your monetization strategy. And when you do figure out your monetization strategy, what you should also really, really, really do at that point is ensure that day one, when you hit your market, that you can justify profitability. Make sure that when you go to market, you are offering that service, that product at the value that you want to see tomorrow, or that you can see a direct link between the offering that you're giving today and the profits or the whatever you want to accomplish in future, right? If what you're looking to do is build a community and you go to market, and what you're optimizing for is to get a whole ton of users on there, so you build a community because community is your monetization strategy, then make sure that when you go to market, you are really, really, really optimizing for community, and you're really, really getting people on board at the velocity that you want to get them on board. If you're looking to get people pay a certain subscription amount, make sure that when you go to market, the people are happy to pay that amount for your subscription. So make sure you're going to market at the value you want to realize in future. So monetization, I'd say, is my top warning.
Excellent. Tom, warnings.
I have a twofold answer to this question. First one is for early stage startups. When people come together to build something, one thing that always kills the startup is the ego, and kills the partnership, kills the friendship, or whatever it started. But the second thing is people do not communicate their expectations really well. What do they want from this? At what point do I want to sell a startup if it becomes successful? Or is this my baby that I want to grow into business for life and stuff like that? That doesn't get communicated, and then when it happens, it can kill the idea, kill the partnership, or kill the startup. And a lot of people fail to just build their own, SWOT analysis. Just what are your strengths and weaknesses and opportunities and threats? And sometimes life just happens. Sometimes people will get twins, and I have 2 kids. I can't work on a startup anymore. And it's something that you need to communicate up front. What are your life goals and stuff like that? And this is something that is really smart early on. And secondly, that I see change the startup. I wouldn't say it failed, but the company changed completely, became something else. It was a really great startup that had a rapid expansion, and the growth couldn't follow the expansion. So a lot of people were onboarded fairly quickly, and it changed the entire culture of the company. It changed how a company operates, and it just killed what it was in the beginning, and it became something else. And everybody that built it in what it was just left, so it became something completely different. Somebody might say it was not a failure, but from my perspective, it was a complete failure.
Okay. And since we have a few minutes left, I'm just going to quickly remind people of some of the podcasts we have coming up so they can mark their calendars. And then I'll ask each of you to let the audience know how they can follow you online. So any Instagram handles, Twitter handles, things like that. So quick show notes. Please join us tomorrow. Our podcast will be defining your personal brand and expressing it on LinkedIn. And we're going to learn from a LinkedIn expert a little bit about how the algorithm works. So if you've been wondering why nobody sees your LinkedIn posts, we're going to tell you. Monday I'm taking off. Tuesday, of course, is office hours. Ask me anything. So I'm usually on live taking questions. Everything starts at 6:30 p.m. Italy time. Please adjust for where you are. Wednesday, September 9, we're going to bring back the always awesome Joel Barr, who's going to talk to me and you about debunking bad advice people give people about their UX portfolios. Boo, debunking bad portfolio advice. Thursday, September 10, we're going to welcome my life and business coach, who I've been working with for 14 years, and she's going to talk about defining your life purpose. Because people ask me, should I go into UX? And I say, I don't know. So let's talk about finding your life purpose, because it might be different than mine. So that's what's coming up the next week or so in our universe. And thanks to everybody for tuning in. Now let's go around the panel, and please tell everybody how they can find you, follow you, website, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, whatever you do, and you might need to spell it. Nehal.
All right, so mine's easy. The only social media that I'm on is LinkedIn. My handle is Nehal Shah R. That's NEHAL SHAH R. And my website, or my company's website rather, immersiongroup.co.za, right? co.za, because I'm based in South Africa.
Okay. Got it. Excellent. And Dr. Francis, how do we find you?
LinkedIn. LinkedIn is the only social media as well that I do at a professional network. I don't know if they define themselves as social media. So please find me on LinkedIn. Connect with me on LinkedIn. It's FrancisNwakire, Francis Nwakire. Looking forward to connecting with you.
Excellent. Tom, tell everybody all your places and things.
Oh, I will keep the list short because I'm on everything, and please don't follow me on TikTok or on Pornhub. Those are private. And you can find me on LinkedIn as Tom Kozacinski. It's TomKozacinski, and my website is just my last name.com. So Kozacinski.com, and on Instagram and Twitter I'm a Universe CEO. It's an old ego-driven nickname that I'm just too lazy to change, and I'm always happy to connect. If anybody has any questions or follow-ups, I will give my best to answer. And I also run a free community for anybody starting their business, want to start up or just go freelance. It's called Indie Club UK, and everybody's welcome. It's completely free, and just come in, join, ask questions, and hopefully I can help you on your journey as well.
Wonderful, wonderful. And of course, as always, please everybody subscribe on YouTube, hit the like button, do the things that you know help me in the algorithm. That's the least I can ask. And so on that note, I know many of you know where to find me. Of course, deltacx.com, here on YouTube. I don't tweet so much. Sometimes people tweet at me. I use Delta_CX, and I have Delta_CX on Instagram, though I think I post something once a month. So I am not very active there. I'm very active on LinkedIn. I hope you'll follow me there. And of course, keep coming back to all of our YouTube extravaganzas. So time is up. Panel, thank you so much for joining. Tom, I knew you, but Francis and Nehal, great to meet you. And I hope we'll stay connected. And maybe we should do a follow-up in some months and see how your startups are going.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Well, I'll play us out of here.
opportunity.
Yes, thanks. And thanks to the audience
Cheers.
for great questions, and see everybody soon. Thanks for watching. Delta CX is available for consulting and projects related to CX and UX strategy, leadership, training, problem finding, problem solving, and innovation. Learn more at deltacx.com.